My kids, we would go to these parties and I would pack them like a lunch pail with stuff that they would eat. Now, of course, that's really awkward because everybody else has pizza and a sugary drink, and there's my child with their lunchbox eating their non-sugar based stuff. It puts them in a challenging position and asks them to be okay to be that kid.
So there's the easy and the hard way when it comes to choosing the right foods. I think that this is a challenge every parent has to go through and has to fight with and find where they're most comfortable and make the best decision they can for their family. But I'm not sure that we have the right answer.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bryan Johnson podcast. I'm here with my Blueprint co-founder, Kate Tolo, and Dr. Mike Mallin, who is an emergency medicine doctor and also my physician. Today, we're talking about something near and dear to my heart, which is children, health, and wellness. And so this has been something on my mind for the past 22 years of my life since I had my first child. I remember going to the store and looking at the ingredients label and saying, what is this? And then I started reading about the ingredients and I thought, this is a bad situation. But they were in our pantry, stocked, and when we went to their friend's house, they were there as well. It was this common thing that all the kids ate, these foods with high sugar and ingredients which didn't sound great. So I have been fighting that battle for 22 years. It has been very challenging because my kids naturally want to eat those things and their friends have those things. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's other things as well that are very problematic for our kids, including toxins in food and the environment. And so this one is a sensitive and scary topic because children are helpless, and it just breaks my heart and all of our hearts to see that when they're growing up and they have everything before them, they can become disadvantaged by the foods they eat, the air they breathe, the water they drink. So we want to acknowledge in entering this topic that typically we've approached this podcast where we speak about the perils and the science of danger, and then we go through the protocols. Today, we're going to flip it, and we're going to do the protocols that you can focus on, and we're going to try to make it manageable, like things you can actually do, and talk through the nuance of being a parent, bringing these practices inside your home. So with that, Dr. Mallin, Kate Tolo, let's get started. What can we tell adults of the narrow and focused things they can do to keep their children safe and healthy?
I think the first thing to note here is that the good news is that this is all entirely preventable. These are actually things that are in our environment that oftentimes we're unknowingly opting for. So the biggest thing is education. So there are a couple of things we can start with. One is synthetic dyes. Mike, what are synthetic dyes?
Synthetic dyes are colorings that are additive, added to many food products, but like disproportionately added to children's products. The ones that we're thinking of typically are the red and yellow dyes, and those have been linked directly to inattention and to hyperactivity disorders. It probably happens with all of the synthetic dyes. So there's actually been a movement to try to reduce all synthetic dye exposure, especially in children's foods across the board. But the research has been predominantly on red 40 and yellow number 5.
In typical, I think this is the right stats, across food generally, it's around 19% contain synthetic dyes, whereas in children's food, again, like this is companies marketing toward kids, it's a high percentage, it's around 28%. It's a note for us all to not assume when we look at a product that it's healthy for our kids if it's marketed toward our kids. Actually, maybe it's best to have the opposite assumption and turn it over and look at the back of the packaging. Fortunately, oftentimes it'll say loud and clear, red 40 or some sort of other synthetic dye. And so you can know that's not for my kids.
Generally, you can look for those foods that are sort of quote unquote organic. Those typically don't have the synthetic dyes in them, but really the best thing to do is just look at the actual ingredients themselves and look for those specific dyes. But think about like sports drinks, Kool-Aid are big offenders, cereals are big offenders. Anytime when you see like really brilliant and colorful colors in your child's food, that's probably a synthetic dye.
And these things have been linked to things like behavioral effects in children, so ADHD, gut issues, higher risk of cancer, cellular damage. So not to freak you guys out, but it is a serious thing that is worth paying attention to. You both have kids. Have you found that sitting them down and trying to educate them on these topics actually works?
Yes. So interestingly, my son does seem to have some behavioral changes with the synthetic dyes, and we taught him very young to avoid certain color foods, and like he actually pays attention to it. It's kind of interesting, like because he learned so young. He's like, oh no, I don't eat blue foods.
Yeah.
Like really?
As it relates to the potential harm of ingredients, I think we're still learning the effects of these synthetic dyes and then other ingredients in food. Looking back though, the removal of lead from gasoline in the 1980s was correlated with an average IQ increase of 2 to 5 points. And looking at this from an economic perspective, that would be worth $8 trillion because there's a 1.8 to 2.4% increase of lifelong earning potential per additional IQ point. And so one of the fastest ways to become a thriving nation is to increase the IQ of your population. And these things, bad, harmful ingredients and toxins can potentially lessen IQ. We are currently having a pretty big and loud debate in the United States about our budget deficit, but never does anyone make the argument that a way to solve the budget is to actually lessen the toxin and bad ingredient load in the United States? It's mostly about cutting Medicare or Medicaid. The insanity is cutting the services that are trying to deal with the catastrophic harm of our toxin and bad food system. So it's really kind of backwards. You can also use this as a vector. When I was explaining this to my kids, I would explain to them the harm that these ingredients were doing to their body. Like it would basically, like when they were in soccer, I would explain after the game when a parent shows up with these Capri Suns. So these little packages that have 20, 30 grams, I'm guessing. I said, if you drink that, you run slower on the field. And they're like, oh, okay, I see that. Or like, you're not going to be able to pass as well or shoot your goals as well. So I tried to connect it to very tangible things that
matter to them.
Yeah, exactly. And so I remember Talmadge was like really responsive that when I told him that, he was like, I got it. And like, cause he was the fastest kid on his team and he did not want to lose that edge. So like Mike, I sat my kids down and I tried to use various tactics to explain how bad ingredients negatively affected the things they cared about. And this is also very similar to the idea of sleep culture in a family. So as we go through these things today, and we talked about the synthetic dyes and how Mike spoke to his son about this, the same you could do with sleep and say, we are a family of sleep. This is our rule for screen time. We turn screens off 60 minutes before bed. We don't eat, this amount of time before bed. Nobody gets out of their bed during the night unless there's an emergency. Nobody wakes anyone up ever. And you have a star chart where you're giving these assessments. We've talked about this on a previous podcast. So you could actually follow the same protocol that we're going to talk about today in terms of sugars, dyes, and other ingredients, that you just establish a family culture. Now, of course, there's secondary challenges that when they go to a friend's birthday party and that party has pizza, cupcakes, and sugary drinks, what do? And so I remember that with my son, we would go to these parties and I would pack them like a lunch pail with stuff that they would eat. Now, of course, that's really awkward because they are in that moment now like doing this really weird thing. Everybody else has pizza and a sugary drink, and there's my child with their lunchbox eating their non-sugar based stuff. So it puts them in a challenging position and asks them to be okay to be that kid. But like these are the kinds of things we should probably talk about, of practical things that parents can do to try to counteract these damaging things in the kids' bodies.
Yeah, and one of the things you were just talking about there, Bryan, the attempt to reduce sugar intake. Really, we should be trying to limit sugar to 25 grams a day for kids. And I don't think that registers for most people how low that is. When you think about what kids typically eat, the majority of things marketed to children have 25 grams of sugar in them. Just like one serving of one of those items. The idea of trying to limit to 25 means a complete overhaul of what is typically fed to the children in our society. I mean, we're talking about like a Capri Sun, more than 25 grams, right? A cupcake, more than 25 grams. Like any of these things that are like standard, typical daily foods that children eat get you past that threshold of 25 grams of sugar. It's a complete switch.
And to jump back, you guys, on the synthetic dyes, sorry, I'm going back on this, is I just looked up on GPT the top 10 foods that have the highest level of synthetic dyes. I'll run through a few. Target mini green cupcakes, 55.3 milligrams. That's yellow 5, yellow 6, blue 1, and red 40. Kool-Aid Burst Cherry, 52 milligrams. Sunny D Orange Strawberry, 45 milligrams. Captain Crunch Oops All Berries, 41 milligrams. Can we please make a meme of Captain Crunch Oops and cross out all berries and put in all synthetic dyes? Pillsbury Funfetti Confetti Frosting, 41 milligrams. Trix, 36 milligrams. Crush Orange Soda, 33. Skittles, 33. Fruity Cheerios, 31. M&M's Chocolate Milk, 29. Reading this list, I am chock full of synthetic dyes. I mean, this is what I ate as a kid. Like my entire childhood was this menu of foods.
Same.
Is this why I'm so messed up?
And 12% synthetic dyes. Yeah.
I have the opposite response where my mum worked so hard. I got on a plane to the US as a uncontaminated being. And then I landed, and you know what the first thing I ate it was in the US? I got into New York in my hotel room.
I'm bracing myself.
I'm too scared to go outside and get food because I'm 19 alone in the country. And I got a packet of Skittles, and that's what I had for dinner.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to me, Kate. So despite your childhood of like being raised on all these healthy things and like focusing on, food quality, the first thing you ate was Skittles. Like that is like, that's something that I think is a delicate nuance about what we're talking about. Like, do you do more like Kate's mother did, where you like just make sure you prevent the access to any of these foods, or like Bryan's done with his children? Or do you like try to teach them the way, expecting that someday they're gonna leave home, they're gonna make decisions for themselves, and if you've completely excluded those foods, they're just going to choose all of those foods? Do you know what I mean? Like I wonder about this all the time.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the right answer would be. I will say that I think if you're gonna have to choose a path, definitely go on the more extreme, because it at least educates them that you're making a decision every time. So like I was 19, I was like, I'm like consciously making decisions with that information at least in my arsenal. And so I knew I was rebelling. I knew that I was like, it was a decision I got to make because I was an adult and I could eat whatever I wanted. I think that's still a better starting point than not knowing at all.
And Mike, to your point on the 25 grams of sugar per day for the child, in the US, the average added sugar is 68 grams per day.
Wild.
Sounds about right.
Just added sugars as well.
I mean, that's just like a Capri Sun and some cereal, like that's not even a wild day.
You guys, I also want to mention, like, Bryan, you went through all the obvious ones, right? Like Skittles, you can see the color, but here are some things that might have unexpected dyes. So plain hot dog buns, oftentimes that light brown crust has a yellow 5 and 6. Blueberry bagels, the berries get extra coloring from red 40 and blue 1. This isn't all, but these are in some. Wasabi covered peas, so the bright green, blue 1, yellow 5. Dill pickles, same situation. Berry flavored yogurts. So it's definitely worth noting that these marketing tactics are often hiding in plain sight.
If we go down from easy to hard, then we could start with, like, we sit the family down and we say, okay, there's some things that are clearly not a good idea, like M&Ms and sugar cereals. Like the list we just went down for synthetic dyes, that's a pretty good category. And then we get into more nuanced things where you get like a Capri Sun, where they frame it as like fruit juice. You're like, it's fruit, it must be good. But then it's got 25 extra grams of sugar. And so those are, anytime you have high concentrations of sugar, that's also bad. Kate just went through a few of the nuanced ones where a hot dog bun or a certain kind of bagel, where those are more nuanced, where you're thinking this is a whole food, it's fine, it's not, quote unquote ultra processed, therefore. And so, Mike, how do we think about, as a parent, how do you tackle this complicated problem, knowing you can't do it all, but you want to try to knock out the biggest ones because you're battling this in your own knowledge. You're battling this in your own time. And also with your kids, like what will your kids actually do? Because there's like this discussion of what's good for the kids. Then there's the reality of kids are like, I'm not eating that. Like, not doing it. So how would you take this? Because we have quite a few suggested protocols here that we've done research on, but how would you do it as a parent?
So there's two different categories. There's the easy and the hard way when it comes to choosing the right foods, right? So the easy way is probably just eliminating sugar and looking for, red 40 and yellow 5 on the ingredient labels. The hard way being like, eliminating sugar, eliminating like quote unquote ultra processed foods, eliminating, like buying only organic. And then there's also the behavioral side of things where it's like, I'm just going to buy these foods for my house and stop there and just expose my child to to the best foods possible at home. And I'm not going to say you can or cannot eat things when you're out at a birthday party or doing other things. And then the hard way on the behavioral side would be like, I'm going to try to control everything that goes into my child's mouth or everything that they get exposed to, right? So it just depends on like how far you're willing to go on both fronts, right? I think the easy path is buy the best foods that you can without getting crazy about it for your home, right? That's the easy path. And then the hard path is like be meticulous about every single ingredient in your child's food. Make sure it's all real food and then make sure that that's all that they get all of the time. I don't know what the right answer is. I mean, to be honest with you, like I think that this is a challenge every parent has to go through and has to fight with and find where they're most comfortable in terms of the easy or hard path and make the best decision they can for their family. But I'm not sure that we have the right answer.
So Kate, your mother was very thoughtful about how what you consumed. And there's now a lot of research out there. For example, we know that certain foods have certain addictive powers. For example, consumption of biscuits and cookies have a 4.1 times risk of being addicted. Sausages have an 11 times risk of creating addiction. And so some of these foods really are engineered for addiction. That their entire game is doing that. If your parents would have framed this to you in terms of, hey, Kate, eating this is going to create some kind of addiction pathway, would you have been responsive to that? Or did the approach that she took, do you think prepped you to generally now have good intuitions on what you want to put into your body?
Yeah, I think, I don't know what would have worked, but I will say, even though I had that packet of Skittles, I think that the path that my mother took was the right path for educating us. She wasn't super restrictive, Mike, outside of the household in terms of like, she wasn't going to punish us if we, had some of our friends XYZ. She just tried to create an environment where we stepped into the environment and the environment was safe, period. I would say that actually genuinely worked. There were also all of these just basic axioms that probably were not perfect, but did the job. So if you say, avoid dyes because they're toxic, and you look in the back, and even if a dye isn't toxic, it's probably going to be alongside other things that aren't so good for you, like added sugars. Like the companies that are using these tactics are not going to be worrying about other things as well. And so it kind of creates this, like, I would avoid these things. So I feel like my mum used the word chemicals a lot. And even though that wasn't necessarily perfectly scientific, it did knock out the majority of the bad things.
Yeah, we try to use eat real food, I think, is one of sort of the axioms that we use in around our house. And I mean, I don't know, is real a good enough descriptor? It's sort of subjective, but like, it's just trying to get at like this concept of the fact that people are trying to sell you fake things. And you should be on the lookout for the realness of what you're putting in your body. The
other thing you can do is, I remember when we were in India, and I gave Talmadge the air measurement device. So he could go from room to room and cafe to cafe, indoors, outdoors, in our various cars. And he measured the air quality in every single environment we were in. We got into a car and there he was like, okay, can you please turn on, the internal air filtration system in this BMW? And can you see what kind of filter this car has for PM 2.5? And VOCs. And so if you give children the tools, whether it be an air quality monitor or a wearable, and you just say, or even like a CPG, can kids use a blood glucose monitor?
I mean, there's no reason they couldn't. Yeah, they use it, and diabetic children do.
Cool. So even helping them build intuition that if you drink this fruit juice or if you eat this sugar cereal, look what happens to your blood glucose. In fact, last Halloween, I wanted to set up a little station in front of my house and have sugar treats there, and then they do a finger prick blood draw to look at blood glucose rise. So like have the kids come down the street, eat the candy, and then show them blood glucose rise or something like that. I mean, I guess how long would you have to wait? The blood glucose rise would be like 15 to 20 minutes, right?
Yeah, it's around 10, 15 minutes.
Actually, I could probably just measure their blood glucose as they arrive because presumably they've been snacking on the food they've already gotten.
Oh, true.
It's like a whole new level of vampire, Bryan.
Honestly, I think we're going to do it. Right? For Halloween, we should definitely do that. Okay, so one way to approach this is we've tried to isolate this into some easy categories where you and children can be educated to know there are certain things that are bad. So artificial dyes, we've given 10 examples of foods that have them. We've talked about 25 grams of sugar per day is what you want to target, which is extremely low. So that means you really want to avoid anything with added sugar outside of that budget. We should also talk about that the environment matters a lot. We've discussed this in other podcasts where the air and the environment matter a lot for a child's exposure to toxins. And so this is a reminder to have a MERV 13 filter or as high as you can in your HVAC system. That'll help generate clean air. That's also the truth. You can have a HEPA filter on your vacuum and vacuum 2 times per week to lessen the number of toxins because kids spend a lot of time on the floor, crawling, walking, and putting things in their mouth.
Just along the same lines, when you were talking about the lead exposure and increase in IQ, there's actually been some interesting studies with air quality and performance in school. So there was a study in 18 LA schools that got HEPA activated carbon units put into the classrooms. There was a 60 to 100% reduction in particulate matter, which was associated to a 0.2 standard deviation improvement in mathematics and English scores. So just like we see toxins altering our ability to perform intellectually, the same is true for air quality. So improving your child's air quality is not only better for their health, but it's also better for their brain.
Yeah, and even things like what allergy they may end up developing. So there's a study that shows that early exposure to air pollution may double the risk of a peanut allergy becoming persistent by age 10. That's absolutely wild, especially because I think I saw a stat, peanut allergy treatments cost expected to hit $300 million by 2030. So while that half of that could be preventable.
Now we've covered these protocols, should we jump quickly into the evidence around the problems, I guess, the severity of the challenges for children in this country, in case some people are interested in the data of how severe of a situation it is with obesity and toxin exposure and child death? Or do you guys think did we cover the protocols up until this point?
I think we covered the protocols. So to recap, it would be avoid artificial dyes, limit your total sugar intake to, you said 25 grams per day?
Or less, yeah.
Or less. And that's that's inclusive total sugar. So a lot of, if you're having fruit that has a lot of natural sugars, so it's total. Then you also want to improve air quality, toxins. So measure, get a filter if you need.
I mean, I'd probably say like unstructured play and outdoor activity or movement, some sort of physical activity of at least an hour a day is a good rule of thumb. I think that can be missed and forgotten a lot in our society. I mean, like, it seems like kids now have like 15-minute recess at school. So like it's falling back on the parent to make sure that they're getting their physical activity in, where traditionally this is just something that just happened. Now we actually have to think about it. You have to pull them away from the video games, pull them away from the screens, make sure you kick them outside. Something that's often forgotten.
Yep. And then the other thing we should cover is sleep. We talk about the importance of it. We all know how incredibly important it is, but kids need more sleep for their cognitive development. So if they're between the ages of 3 and 5, it's somewhere between 10 to 13 hours. Around age 6 to 12, you're looking at 9 to 12 hours per night. And then 13 to 18, in that teenage range, you're looking at 8 to 10 hours per night. So I think that's definitely something that all of us could have benefited from, like these early life habits around sleep and being taught to have a consistent bedtime and make it sacred in your home.
Do we dare talk about like screens and social media and mental health? Or is that like a whole different podcast?
I mean, let's do it. I mean, we're talking about things that negatively affect health, and we've focused on food inputs and then toxins. Yeah, let's do it because it is equally consequential.
There's a lot of different ways to approach mental health in childhood. I think the most obvious things that we've seen recently are the introduction of social media and screens to at least our older children, well, screens to younger children. But really limiting screen exposure with the younger kids is extremely important, making sure you're not just plopping them down in front of an iPad, and then trying to limit social media exposure at least until later in childhood. There's, some studies that suggest it should be not until 8th grade, some even 13, 16, never. I think like
ideally.
Ideally never. There's, it feels like every year there's a new study that comes out that suggests it should be later and later in life. And this was a big challenge, I think, for everybody around COVID too, right? Like all of a sudden, all these kids are home and, parents don't know what to do. They're trying to work from home. And ultimately kids just got plumped in front of TVs a lot. And, we'll see what the side effects are from that long term. But I think now that we're looking back on this, realizing that, more unstructured play, less screen time in general is better. Talking about emotions is something that I think is also new and important when it comes to mental health, just so you're educating children about what emotions feel like and what emotions are, letting their emotions actually be present and play out, as opposed to trying to squash them, like you shouldn't cry or don't be angry. Like, no, they got to feel those feelings. So I feel like this is a much bigger and more in-depth topic, but just starting to like paint the picture a little bit of focusing on childhood mental health is extremely important, and I think will become more and more of a prevalent aspect of parenting in the near future.
Mike, as a doctor, when you look through the data, I mean, in reading over this was pretty terrifying of the mortality rates in the U.S., of the dangers of being a child, of being born into the U.S., of the increase of obesity and of blood glucose challenges, and the increases are alarming, like between 20 and 80%. What is your assessment? Like what's happening?
Our culture, specifically in the U.S. and more so throughout the rest of the world, as like U.S. culture seems to sort of like percolate into other developed countries, is making terrible decisions for our children. There are many benefits to a capitalistic society, and there are many downsides when it comes to advertising to children. And I think a lot of this has to do with poor choices on the side of corporations and parents about what is okay to expose our children to, from everything from toxins to foods, to air quality, to social media and screens. We're just making lots of bad decisions. And it's scary, but also not super surprising to me when you look at the rates of obesity. So the fact that U.S. infants have had a 78% higher risk of death compared to babies in other wealthy countries, like that is a freaky statistic. I mean, that's scary. But at the same time, when you look at like the levels of obesity in our children, when you look at the amount of screen time exposure, the decrease in physical activity, that number becomes less and less unrealistic and more believable, which is a pretty scary thing to say.
So the one thing that we can see also behind the scenes is that in 1977, Congress passed a Toxin Substances Control Act, which basically assumed that chemicals are safe until proven harmful. And we've had a 50x increase in the chemicals and plastics now in circulation since the 1950s. And so a U.S. study showed that 201 children aged 2 to 4 years old had at least 96 different chemicals in 5% of the urine samples, and 34 were present in over 90%. When we had the LA fires and we saw 20,000 homes get lit up, we saw those toxins transfer from the fires, like the burning of the homes and cars, to my body. And we could go down and list out every chemical and say, yep, that's PVC pipe. Yep, that's a floor. Yep, that's a car. So you can see these chemicals transferred in real time. And of course, a fire is an acute event, whereas otherwise we have these slow burn events that aren't as dramatic. But you can basically see the parallel of toxins that are manufactured in all of society end up in our bodies, which is no surprise. And then you can take those chemicals, you can say, yep, that one causes disruption of hormones, that one causes disruption of cognition, et cetera, et cetera. So the chemicals we've produced in the world. Now, these are not produced as toxins. They're produced as clever chemicals to do various things. Manufacturing, they're usually well-intentioned. Non-stick pans, for example, like we talked about with PFAS, also those end up in our bodies and become very complicated. And so again, back on the podcast is hopefully those of you who hang out with us week to week, you see the through line on everything we're doing and what the team has successfully done with me in that we have tried to systematically reduce the exposure of these toxins in the world and then also try to eliminate them from my body. And so I hope that all of you take hope that you can, like week to week, day to day, week to week, make very small changes. So whether it be the sleep hygiene to say, hey, family, we're doing this. And now you're saying, family, also, we're not doing this. And then slowly step into these additional patterns where first it's what do we eat inside our home? And what kind of, how do we maintain a clean environment? Then it's what do you do when you go to a birthday party? And then it's, what do you do when you become an adult and leave the family, where you no longer have these kinds of rules in place. If we do this together, you will slowly start changing your habits as well. And that will have this cumulative effect. But really, you do need to take a very proactive role in all of these because society is not doing it for you. There's no one in society really looking after you. And so hopefully that will turn. But until then, it really needs to be a ground up swell by all of us that we're going to reject the things that people have done. Now, I will say the contrast to this of the fact that we had this congressional law passed, the FDA will not let drugs on the market until proven safe. So it's the exact opposite, that people trying to do good things with medicines are blocked until they have incredibly high rigor of evidence to show they actually do things. Whereas in the chemical sphere, you can produce whatever you want, and then it has to be proven bad over time. So it's really a twisted, backwards approach where the two things should be swapped.
Bryan, do you think that you're looking after people? You said nobody's looking after you in society. Is that your role?
Yeah, that's a good point. I suppose that's, by default, it's the one I try to step in. Maybe because as a child, I think my parents were basically, they said yes to the system. They just what people did, they did, and they didn't scrutinize it very much. And this is not a criticism of them. It's just and then therefore I'm a product of that. And so I definitely did not want my children to be in a similar situation. I wanted to find the weaknesses of the system and correct for it and then battle against it. But it's pretty tough. And I guess, So Mike, I think I do probably try to put that role in people's lives.
This is a tough one. This is I think it's as a parent thinking about all of these things, it's hard not to feel a little powerless, you're in this situation where it feels like the culture and society is working against you and you're battling against everything. You're battling against social media. You're battling against friends. You're battling against the fact that no one else is paying attention to what color dye is in the green cupcakes that they're giving to their children at the birthday party. And I guess I just try to take some solace in the fact that I'm paying attention when I can and doing the best that I can, at least in my home, and establishing some sort of understanding and insight into the importance of what my children put into their body, which is not necessarily something that my parents did. I think in a similar way, Bryan, my parents just sort of trusted the system and trusted that corporations wouldn't sell bad chemicals to children. And I guess that's pretty awesome that we've even come that far.
Yeah.
That we're even in a place now where we can recognize that hey, we got to pay attention to this stuff, and if you just think about it as I'm just doing the best I can with what I got and have a little grace towards ourselves, it doesn't feel quite as big and as ominous, So I guess I just try to think about it that way, act where I can, where it makes sense, in a rational manner.
And good news, companies are, through all of our voices, forced to reconcile with these realities. Kraft and Heinz have pledged to remove all synthetic dyes by 2027. Ideally, that would happen sooner. I also understand how hard it is to make product changes on a quick time scale. The fact that they're saying all synthetic dyes in 2 years is exciting, because I do think that we will be able to push our environment to actually change.
So you guys, let us know how this went. I mean, hopefully you're walking away with some feeling camaraderie that you can build systems inside your family and your homes, and that you can make conscientious decisions with your children and teach them the dangers of dyes, of synthetic dyes, of added sugars, even things like air fresheners, which we consider to be nice, or scented candles or aerosols.
I was just going to say that I'm just realizing now that like Talmadge is the example of what having a parent who cares about this overnight has impact on him. Like, who was Talmadge before he was living in your household, not being exposed to these things? Like, he has adopted his environment.
Yes, he has.
And he seems to be doing that willingly.
I think he now fully sees I think this was crystallized in his mind when we went to college, and there were all of his friends, not friends, but like new classmates who were eating all sorts of, bad food. And he's like, that is crazy. Why are they doing that? And I was like, oh man, that felt so good as a father. He had
to like have it come from him.
Yes.
That insight.
Yeah, that this is crazy, you guys. Okay, Mike, how do you feel after this conversation?
I feel more empowered than freaked out as a parent, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, Kate, how are you feeling?
It motivates me to treat every molecule that enters my body with the reality that it has an impact on my ability to do what I want in the world, to be healthy in the long term, to be smart, to be capable, to be strong. So it's definitely motivating.
I wish there was a way that we could make children powerful in society, because they really are powerless, and then they have to grow up and acquire power and then compete against other generations. I wish there was a societal mechanism which inherently made them powerful, like a voting block in society that gave them voice and power, that they didn't need to wait until they were mature and adults and with their own resources and capabilities.
What if they were like, we want free Skittles for all kids?
No, I'm saying that not to ask them what they want, because they're not, of course, developed in a way where they can make these wise choices, but just like what science says is good for them. This is the idea that when I was playing around, if I were president, I was playing around the idea that a third of Congress would be planet Earth, and 2/3 would be human, but Earth would be a voting block in Congress. And you could say the same as AI models improve. It's just a thought experiment of like, if you just reimagine who has power and in what ways to do what. And children are powerless, but it'd be cool if there was like some way to represent their well-being in society where they just get run over right now.
Or even, I extend that to adults too. Like, if our biological data could vote on our behalf.
That's true.
In Congress. If we're seeing that sugar makes us obese and it kills us, probably shouldn't have sugar. Probably should have some regulation around it.
That's true. I guess that's what Blueprint is. Blueprint gave my body all the power of decision making and removed my mind from the equation of like, I feel like this. Okay, guys, I think that was very sobering and actually kind of somber. I think, Mike, I felt you in this, that like you take your role as a father very seriously. You care deeply about your children. And Kate, I think you feel the same. I think you feel very empathetic towards the situation that others are in. And I think you appreciate your mother's efforts in your life to give you a very strong start. And so I hope that this emotionally resonates, that, it really is a powerful thing to stand up for our children's potential in life, that when they become disadvantaged because of the decisions that we adults make in society, it just stinks. And of course, all three of us are on the receiving end of that, where we have had things in our life where it's not always been the best for our potential. And that's not because the people around us didn't love us. It's because the systems of society just were not smart enough. Hopefully, everyone, you've walked away with a few good tips to be better members of society and to protect the most vulnerable and the people who will define the future of our existence. All right, let's wrap. Good to see you all, and go to bed on time. This is the Bryan Johnson Podcast. Special thanks to my co-hosts Kate Tolo and Dr. Mike Mallin. For more science breakdowns and protocols, subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow the podcast on your favorite platform, or follow me on Instagram or X at Bryan Johnson.